right, let's toss it over to the fourth member of our broad.
Most of the time, Joe Parker can be found fighting out of a low guard, characterized by a low lead hand and a backhand that floats somewhere between the chin and chest level. Here, he relies upon upper torso movement and the backhand to parry punches, but he often simply mistimes his head movement or the parry and gets tagged with jabs. As a result of the low lead hand, his ability to control distance suffers somewhat, as the lead hand isn't up to provide punch traffic nor occupy the space between him and his opponent. With the low lead hand, Parker also uses the cross parry with his rear hand to parry his opponent's rear hand, which usually doesn't work and could be disastrous against Dubois. As the backhand parry carries a great share of its defense, it can be feinted out of position to create openings for offense, especially with the level change, which Dubois makes use of. Low guard practitioners often accentuate their defense with footwork to exit range and evade punches. This isn't something Parker doesn't attempt, rather his execution of it is suboptimal. He tends to step with his rear foot and then bring his lead foot back into a narrow stance before stepping out. He may also crosswalk backwards. The former isn't a very quick way to move back. The latter breaks totally from fundamentals as you cross your feet and compromise your balance, limiting your offensive and defensive options until you reset. It also has the side effect of keeping Parker on a straight line going back for longer than necessary, and often ending up pushed back onto the ropes where his defensive options dwindle further. Dubois is nothing if not explosive, and often follows opponents out with offense as they back out. While Dubois can use fundamental footwork, he's inconsistent. He'll often fall into cross-walking or cross-stepping while trying to match his opponent's positioning, breaking his base longer than it ought to be. And stepping with his lead foot, letting his rear foot come forward and gather his feet, compromising his balance, all opening him for a myriad of tactics, including disengagement traps. When Joseph Parker fights off the back foot, he lacks a set traps with his movement. A lateral trap is where you step laterally and then attack while your opponent is out of position, or just as they match the new positioning. A disengagement trap entails stepping out of range and attacking as your opponent comes forward. These could be effective given Dubois' footwork issues, but it's not that simple. The problem again is Parker's own footwork. He tends to cross his feet while moving laterally. This creates an issue with his balance and defense being compromised, and his op possibly being able to set their feet just as or even before he can, which would nullify the trap entirely. Parker's footwork issues when backing out can make it difficult to set disengagement traps if he's attacked before he can set his feet. Given Dubois will sometimes explode to catch fighters moving laterally, Parker may find himself being hit by something big while he doesn't have the base to properly defend himself. Both fighters have a tendency to throw single mid-range jabs, considered the most dangerous punch in boxing due to trading a relatively weak jab for any number of stronger counterpunches. Jabbing onto a flat foot means that sometimes Parker's momentum carries him into a vulnerable cross step. As a result of his low lead hand, Parker's jab often drifts back low after throwing, leaving an opening for counterpunching. Parker will often cross his feet even when throwing the stab, and will add to the issue by taking a wide step, leaving him heavy on the front foot until he recovers his lead foot back in the stance, and vulnerable throughout the entire process. Dubois exacerbates his jab by throwing full step-in single mid-range jabs, where he essentially falls in the range. And the occasional bow and arrow or drawing his rear hand away from his face means he's even more open. He'll sometimes jab off the front foot, the remaining momentum will carry him further into range or into a cross step. Both fighters also have jab counter arsenals. However, Dubois often counters jabs with a single mid-range jab of his own, which could then be countered. It can also be drawn out by jab probes, which Parker has used situationally in the past. Daniel Dubois fights out of a loose conventional guard. The conventional guard is inherently active, as it makes use of the gloves to pick off and parry punches. Due to this, the gloves can be taken out of position by feints and probes to create lanes for offense. These feints may cause Dubois to drop his backhand, creating not only an obvious lane to his right side, but forcing him to use a single shield to block backhands in a closed stance, where he has to guess the trajectory of his opponent's strongest punch with a single glove, a game often lost. Even if he does correctly block the punch, it still could be strong enough to blast through the shield anyway. Dubois' flared elbows also leave him more open to hooks, punches under the elbows to the body, and uppercuts. The uppercut is a strong tool in Joseph's arsenal. Given Dubois' conventional guard issues we previously mentioned, Joe Parker could have success setting up his offense with feints and with the gazelle hook, which he likes to throw either as a lead, use feints to set up, or use to end combinations. The gazelle hook could be landed if thrown after a backhand, given Dubois' tendency to sometimes drop his hands and pull or step back linearly to defend the cross or overhand. Though leaping into range with the hook does incur risk of being countered. Parker will have to be mindful of his feet when he does throw the backhand, as he tends to reach, becoming front foot heavy while throwing and letting his back foot come off the ground, either landing in a square position where his defensive options become limited, or a dangerous forward shift into the opposite stance. Even if he does neither, he may still overextend to the point where his head is thrown past his knee, leaving him open until he resets his stance. Dubois also reaches and often falls in or forward shifts into the opposite stance with his backhand. Both men can counter these mistakes. This isn't an easy fight to call. Joe Parker, while flawed, is the more skilled fighter, but has a lot of miles on the clock. Dubois is the young, fresh, but very flawed champion. IMO, the fight hinges on how successful Danny is pressuring. If he can force Parker backwards and properly cut off the ring, he's likely winning the fight. But if he allows Parker to get comfortable setting traps, or even worse, allows him to set him up mid-range with feints and probes, then the New Zealander can pull off the upset. A KO can happen in either direction given their flaws as well. I'll leave this at 50-50. Let me know how you got it in the comments below. Thanks for watching.